Next step for the scooter is going to be very simply getting new tires on it. Engine runs, things are clean, tires are going to be the most important. So, very straightforward to do this. We've got 2 bolts up front on our front wheel. We've got to drop the exhaust off the rear so that we can get into the rear wheel, remove the nut, pull it off and get it out, so we can take it into the shop and have these tires changed. I ordered very basic Kendas from my local dealer. He'll put them on for me. So pretty straightforward process. We're just going to undo our front axle, drop our exhaust and get this wheel off. Should be very similar to what we had to do on the rough house there. We'll put you back in the corner, let you watch as I pull them off. There we go. 2 scooter wheels pulled off. We're going to drive these over to my local service center / dealer, have him change these tires out for some new Kendas that aren't, well, terrible. And that should put us on our way. For this job, I needed a 17 mil wrench, a 14 mil socket, a 12 mil socket, a 24 mil socket, and an 8 mil socket. And that was everything. I mean, this was really quite easy. So we'll talk about it in a little more detail when everything goes back on, but time to run these off to the dealership. Now, before we take these to the shop and have them changed out, always worth it, just wash the wheels. Give them a cleanup. You don't want to bring something that's filthy and covered in crud and rust and grime and ask a guy to work on them, especially these little 10-inch wheels. Because a lot of these guys have to do them with hand spoons, not with a tire machine. So spend a few minutes, whether they're on the scooter or off the scooter, just clean them up. Makes it better for everybody, and I promise your tech, your tire guy is going to appreciate having something relatively clean to work on. Back again, we've got our nice clean wheels with our nice fresh rubber on them. So both wheels now have brand new Kenda 9090-10 $30 a pop scooter tires. Nothing too fancy, but they feel nice. They've got a tread pattern. They're not stone hard, so I'm going to call it good. While we had them in the shop, in addition to putting on the new tires, we went ahead and we replaced the valve stems. And one thing that I didn't talk about when we pulled them off was the wheel bearings in here. So there's wheel bearings on the front wheel, no bearings on the rear wheel, but both of these were really jammed up. So while I had it at the shop, I went ahead, I had them put in new bearings. Now it's easy enough to do wheel bearings yourself. You can use a little punch and a hammer, some heat, some cold to put them in the new one, some heat and some cold to put in the new ones. But for the $25 he quoted me, because they were already in there and he had them on the shelf, it was worth it for me to have them replaced that way. So really happy with the way that turned out. Before we put these in, I want to take the brake pads out of the scooter. The front brakes look pretty thin. I'm afraid they're going to be really thin. So we'll go ahead and pull out those pads, see what we need. I've already ordered new pads, but they won't be here for a couple of days. So we'll go ahead, we'll pull the brake caliper off. We've already got the buddy up here on this bench ready to go. Get that brake caliper off, check the pads, get those out of there, and then we'll put the wheels back on so that I don't have to leave it sitting on a jack stand. Let you guys watch along while we get that brake caliper off. All right, well, it's a really good thing we took these brake pads off because, and hopefully we can see here, this is how much pad material is left on those. I mean, that's not a millimeter of pad material. I'm afraid I could chip that off with a thumbnail. So definitely a good thing that we went ahead and ordered those new brake pads. I thought maybe I was a little miscalculating when I thought that they looked pretty thin, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that no way would those stop for more than another couple miles. Even looking at the wheel, you could see that the rotor had a little bit of grooving in it. Again, for a 50cc scooter, a little grooving in that rotor, it'll come out when it gets used. But those are not safe. So new Prima brand brake pads for the scooter. Could have bought them from a lot of places. I got them on eBay because that was the fastest shipping I could find. We're gonna clean up our little caliper slide pin here. Popped off the little circlip, which maybe we can see. So that just clips onto the end of here to hold everything together. In addition, little brake spring. So what we're gonna do is, a little soap and water cleaning cloth of some sort. We won't use brake cleaner, but we'll get the caliper cleaned off. We'll push our pistons out so we can take a look at what those pistons look like, make sure they're not too bad. If they are, scrubbing and a little soap and water should do the trick. But we'll get this cleaned up and then we can put our brake caliper back on with our wafer thin brake pads for right now. We're not gonna be riding the scooter, so that'll just wait until our new brake pads show up and we can get them swapped in. But we'll go ahead and do some cleaning. All right, that cleaned up pretty well. Just used some generic cleaning wipes I have, a little scrub brush and a blue rag. Doesn't need to be perfect, right? This is just getting it cleaned up, getting it put back together and serviceable. Pushed the pistons out by actuating the brake caliper, stuck these in there to keep it from closing all the way out. Seems to work. Doesn't seem to be any huge issues there, so we can put the brake pads back in. I know they're just razor thin for now, but at least that gives us something in there, keeps all the parts together. Then we can put the front wheel back on. Part of putting the front wheel back on that we should talk about while we're here is gonna be this crusty, gross looking axle. I mean, even the threads are pretty filthy. So we're gonna hit this with a brush with probably some WD-40, some cleaner, try to get all this corrosion cleaned off of it. This is definitely part of the issue. You can see that's probably right where the bearings are running on this, where the spacer and bearings are running. And that's not great for things spinning. So we'll get this cleaned up, then we'll put the front wheel back in, put our brake caliper on, and that should give us a good place to start off for now. At least this will be back into rolling and running shape. Maybe not quite stopping yet. So what we had to do here was go ahead and make sure that our little retaining clip, big side up here, little side down on the pads, and then the hump gets caught by the pin here. So I did a lot of futzing around with it, but it's in, and now I've got space in here for my brake rotor to run, and that's just going to get bolted right back on here. Now I should probably use some fresh blue Loctite, but since I'm going to take this off and put the new brake pads in pretty soon anyway, we're not going to use the Loctite. Now we're just going to go ahead, put this back in, hold things in place for now so that we've got our caliper where it belongs. Don't need to torque anything down too tight. Just get it lined up, and then we can grab our little tool here and just run it in. Doesn't need to be terrible. And then maybe give it one more quick wipe down. We'll clean it up again when we put those new pads in. But so far, looks a lot better, and at least we know that it's there to work. Next thing is going to be clean up our axle heel. Next thing is going to be to clean up the axle and the spacer, which are pretty grody. So that'll be WD-40 and sandpaper. Just try to get some of that corrosion off. We can skewer it and put our wheel back in. Pretty simple process. Take this. We'll start with a brush and just try to break up some of the corrosion that's on there. We can use our WD-40, little lubrication, and then we're just going to try to work all of the gunk off of the axle. We'll speed things up, and hopefully it's not too weird to sit here and watch me clean it. All things considered, that's looking pretty good. Slides on, spins nicely. We'll make sure to use some good grease when we put it in. But that looks a heck of a lot better than it did before we started cleaning everything up. Another shout out for wearing good gloves. My hands are still clean. Go ahead and get that wheel put in place. We are going to have to line up our speedometer drive, make sure that gets in there. Everything in there looks relatively clean. So that'll go right here. Wheel goes in, axle goes through. We should be all set. Enjoy the view. Straightforward. I think these are a slightly larger, or at least the other tires were burned down more, so I had to lift the scooter up just a hair to get that to slide through. We'll clean off the threads over here and put our axle back in. Probably should look up the torque spec for it as well. So we'll do that, bolt it all together, put the torque spec right here, and we'll be all set. axle is torqued. We squeeze the brake, it stops the wheel. Front wheel on, bolt the back wheel on, and we can So I just zip tied the brake lever down, and now we can that should do it. Rear wheel's on, and rear wheel's not going to spin because the brake lever's zip tied down. Let's go ahead and remount our fender guard, then we'll talk about the exhaust. First though, clean up all the tools I don't need, because it's starting to get cluttered again, and that always makes for a more strenuous work environment. Go ahead and get things cleaned up. We'll come back and bolt this on. Things are cleaned up. I can look at my workbench again and not just cringe. So what we're going to do, hook our exhaust mounting points up here. You can see them. They're open-ended, so I have the nuts just started on the studs. Hook that on, and then we'll get things over, and we will put our mounting bolts in place. Lower mounting bolt is longer, shorter mounting bolt is upper for our exhaust hanger. Probably going to have to go back to that later. Exhaust is back on. So with that, should close us out. Fresh looking wheels and tires. Good looking tread. Wheels cleaned up really nicely. Again, the sort of thing that's going to make the shop like you. Rest of the scooter's a little grody, but we still need to give it a full bath. With that, everybody, I'll say thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.